Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. I'm here with Matt once again from Citizen Earned. 2 weeks ago, we were discussing, what were we discussing? Conspiracy theories and we get into all kinds of stuff here. But we left off the conversation with hope and what gives people hope in the economy and the direction we're going. And I thought it was important. A couple months ago, I gave a presentation on what the problem is. I think it's important to contextualize the problem before you give people hope, because this kind of Pollyanna, like everything's fine when the math doesn't add up, isn't necessarily good. So you have to diagnose the problem in order to look for a personal solution. So I was going to walk through kind of briefly this presentation, and then Matt and I are going to discuss what's the problem, how you can affect it in your own life, and then nationally, who knows, we might solve world hunger today. But I did want to go over this presentation. Again, this was given to some military folks about the history of the US dollar and the problem we have today, because a lot of people have a hard time contextualizing where we are in history, and I think this is important. So have you ever heard of this agreement here in 1944, Matt?
No, it's the first time I've seen it.
Okay, so this one's really important. So Bretton Woods, 2 important days to remember. Bretton Woods in 1944, kind of a profound question that's harder to answer than a lot of people think, is when 2 countries want to trade in something. Let's say Lithuania wants to buy oil from Libya. The question is, what does Lithuania give Libya for the oil? And usually, if it's one of their two currencies, one of them has the upper hand in that trade, right? Because they can print the dollars. So what happened in 1944 is, after World War II, the United States, who didn't have a lot of damage from World War II and had the most gold, said, hey, why don't we go ahead and make that agreement that in that trade, why don't we make it gold? But the problem with gold is it's really hard to transport and it's really slow. So what we'll do is we'll back US dollars to gold. So you probably heard the phrase good as gold. Bretton Woods Agreement was essentially the United States dollar became the world reserve currency, and every other currency was back to the US dollar, because the US dollar was as good as gold. That's what we did in 1944. This caused a cascade effect. Like, all these currencies and this network effect were back to the US dollar. And so the US dollar has pretty much since 1944 been the best currency in the world, has the best purchasing power. And that means the what was the word I was using? Superfluous, or the ubiquitous nature?
Ubiquitous, that's right.
Yeah, I'm enlisted. Okay, I'm kind of dumb. But so the ubiquitous nature of the US dollar. So when it comes to trade around the world, what is trade being conducted in still to this day is US dollars. Why is this important to you as a US citizen? Because when Lithuania and Libya do this trade, now, Lithuania has oil, Libya has dollars. What does Libya do with those dollars once they have them? They buy US treasuries because they get an interest rate. That's how they save in US dollars. And so the US dollar is ubiquitous throughout the world, even if the United States isn't even involved in that trade. 2 countries are often trading in US dollars. This is the most recognized currency around the world. So foreign buyers of our debt have allowed the U.S. to live above our means, because when there is high demand for our debt, it would make sense. So go ahead.
If they value our money and they're trading in our money using it as the benchmark of value, then our debt is also worth a lot.
Which means the interest rate's really low.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So if demand goes up for debt, for government debt, like I want that, right, interest rates go down, because they don't need to incentivize a buyer, because demand's very high. So why would they give out high interest rates? So just like on your home, if you're able to cash out refi at lower and lower and lower interest rates, the payment might stay the same, but you have more cash in your pocket.
Right.
So the second date to keep in mind, August 15th, 1971. There wasn't really any audits of this Bretton Woods system. And kind of an audit, a enforced audit, was France came over and said, "Hey, Nixon, buddy old pal, we think you're printing too much money. We want our gold." And Nixon took us off the gold standard because we didn't have it. So what that did is essentially depegged the dollar to gold. However, demand for dollars remained high. Why? Because that network effect had already existed. So dollars were all throughout the world. And the question is, what do you replace it with? So a lot of people say, oh, okay, well, as soon as you go off the gold standard, we'll replace it with X, Y, and Z.
And this was before cryptocurrency. So we
didn't way before, option. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so you're dealing with institutional inertia.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it. So the inertia of the dollar is still high today, but it remained high after 1971 and didn't start dropping off because we entered something called the petrodollar, which is we talked to these Gulf nations and said, hey, guys, would you mind pricing your oil in dollars, which increased demand for dollars, and we'll give you military support. So basically, people still demand dollars because they demand energy. So the question is, a lot of people say, okay, cool, great. You give me the context of how we got here. But why don't we just like me, declare bankruptcy? Because if we owe all this money and we're never going to pay it back, we just will say, we won't pay it back. That'll work. And a lot of people think we owe all the money to China, but in reality, majority lion's share of the money is owed domestically. So it's either in pension funds, at the Fed, in state and local governments, etc. So majority of that, and you may even own some yourself if you invest in a mutual fund, because a lot of investing, part of that investment is government treasuries. But what does that mean?
You said that last time. It's like $14,000 per person, right?
That's how much we owe. I think it's 90,000 we owe per tax-paying citizen. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. But my point is, like, who actually bought it? Who actually bought that debt from the government? Yeah. You can see there's some foreign holders, but the majority is stateside. But what's the problem with that? If all of a sudden, think about it from like a house sale. Let's just say magically everyone who owned a house, the debt was forgiven. What kind of distortions would that cause in the economy? A ton, because those who had debt would win, those who didn't have debt would lose, et cetera, et cetera. But this kind of debt, government debt, underpins all of society. So there's a corresponding liability to this debt. So as soon as you cancel this debt, it's not just canceling debt, it's causing banks to fail.
You're ripping the rug out from underneath your own feet.
Correct.
I mean, I see the majority is owned by the Federal Reserve System. And as we know, the Fed is a private bank, exchanging money for citizens' trust in the government. So essentially, the Fed is buying the citizens' trust away from the government into a private bank.
And where does the Federal Reserve get their money?
Printed out of thin air.
Yeah.
Did they make it?
Oh yeah, they printed out of thin air, and that's the long pole in the tent. That's what's eventually going to happen. Is Federal Reserve is going to have to buy all of this because as the debt gets bigger,
and then we have an autocracy.
We're halfway there already. So why this is important is that the dollar is the financial grease for the world. If you think of the economy, the world economy as a body, the dollar is the blood, right? It makes the world go round. Okay. It is that system of trade. Okay. So the dollar affects, I've told this to many people, where, when, and why we go to war more than anything else is the dollar. Because what that has allowed us to do, unfortunately, is live way above our means, but we're living way above our means, but we're on stilts, right? And those stilts are getting kind of uneven. And we're like, this country wants to do X, Y, and Z, not use the dollar anymore. That's a problem for us. So remember when I said demand for our currency and demand for our debt means that we have lower interest rates? You'll see here foreign holders of U.S. Treasuries as a percentage of total debt is going down. This is a two-headed monster. One, our debt is going up, and two, the desire for owning that debt at low interest rates is going down. So as demand goes down and supply goes up, the opposite effect happens. The interest rate has to go up to incentivize buyers. Here's the problem. We have $34 trillion in debt. So you can't, just like that cash out refi in your house, as the interest rate goes lower, if the payment remains the same, you have more money. The opposite happens too, right? If you do a cash out refi and that interest rate goes up, your payments go up significantly so. And the United States government has just been living on borrowed time with that reality.
Well, and when you're the standard, and you got that much debt, and you're trying to like pay it back, you're fighting an uphill battle because you're always going to pay more tomorrow.
Correct.
Than you have today.
Absolutely. And I'll show you a chart here. It's like no matter who's in power, that's happening. So there's a couple reasons why we have shot ourselves in the foot and why governments want less and less of U.S. debt. Number one, U.S. sanctioned Russia. If you remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, first thing we did is freeze their central bank assets. And those central bank assets are treasuries, about $600 billion worth. What's the problem with that? If you are the neutral, keyword neutral, reserve asset of the world, and friend and foe use that currency, if you play favorites, desire to use that currency goes down. And that's exactly what's happening. So we froze their central bank assets. And in the recent year, Saudi Arabia considers, remember the petrodollar, one of the biggest oil nations, Saudi Arabia, is considering accepting yuan instead of dollars in trade for oil. And Europe has started putting, because if you remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe, being the virtue signaler that they are, they're like, okay, Putin, bad guy, yada, yada, yada. Despite what you think about that, the majority of their energy was coming from Russia, especially in Germany. And so when you say Putin bad, we're not going to send you our paper currency anymore. We're not going to send you dollars. Putin just goes, fine, you don't get energy. And who gets the short end of the stick? Europe does. And their energy prices are going through the roof because they're having to import from other places.
All of this because they have misattributed consequences to nuclear power.
Oh, yeah.
They could gain their energy independence if they built more nuclear power plants. Right?
And they're shutting them down.
Right. So they're increasing their dependence because of woke progressive culture demonizing certain aspects, right? And like nuclear is just evil. Oh yeah. They're making themselves energy slaves.
That's always, to me, the climate change, folks.
Yeah.
Whatever you think about it, that's always the smoking gun to me. It's like, okay, let's just say you believe that. Okay, then you must believe in nuclear. Oh, you don't believe in nuclear energy. Why is that?
Because it has radiation. It's evil and it's bad. By the way, on the climate change thing, I think it's a pretty easy argument. Just as a real quick aside, the Earth is a battery with biological life on it. It captures energy from the sun and stores that biological life on its surface. Over the course of time, that biological life degrades into oil, and so we save all of that energy. Now, if we're going to tap all of that energy and release it into the atmosphere, the Earth's cycle can't handle that energy release on that scale. So over time, if you keep burning this oil, the Earth is still capturing this energy, and so you're adding more and more energy, and you're releasing more of that energy into the atmosphere at one time. To me, that's enough that like climate change exists, and humans are a massive part of it. We've had 5 mass extinctions on this planet up to this time, so life will come back. The question is whether it will have human life in it or not. So anyway, that's like the quick on the environmental debate. But please continue on with BRICS.
Yeah. Okay. So BRICS, and more on climate change here in a second, but so what's happening, and we can argue the legitimacy of this, if this is a probable thing or whatever, but what is actually happening is BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are trying to come together and saying, hey, the US dollar, they're flexing their power, they're sanctioning people, yada, yada, yada. We don't want to use that anymore. We want to use our own currency around the world. And you might say, okay, good luck with that. But they do have some leverage. Okay. Well, what is their leverage? The trade imbalance around the world. They have a lot of consumption in their country, but they export a lot. Okay. So if you have a relationship where you consume and the other person exports, they need you kind of, but at the end of the day, you really need them, because without them, you don't have stuff. And without them, they don't, or without you, they don't have paper currency. And yes, that would affect them, but in reality, the power dynamic is shifting in that relationship. And we've all experienced that in the United States. Our exports, middle class jobs, manufacturing in the United States since 1971 have gone the wrong direction. They've gone the wrong direction because it's too expensive to make things here. And the real reason for that is the US dollar is too strong. So that means if we want to export anything from the United States, it's going to be more expensive. And then the other leverage they have in the BRICS is how our economy is structured. So this is why recessions hit us really, really hard, because most people live off credit cards, debt, and consumption. And that consumption drives GDP. So when we have a recession, consumption goes down like a lead balloon, and then
our GDP is affected.
Yep. So the question is, when does excess spending become a problem? Because we've been exceeding our budget for years, right? Our tax receipts. We haven't balanced a budget in forever. So the question is, when does the spending actually become a problem? And I always point to this chart here. You got two, time and growth. And when we're looking at how things grow, most people think linearly, like this, 2% per year, and it's kind of growing in this linear straight line. But really what's happening is that exponential line, which is that rate of change. And you'll notice our national debt is going up and to the right at exponential rates. So no matter who the president is, our debt has grown at exponential rates, meaning 10% of 34 trillion would be 3.4 trillion. You add that to the debt, and then you add 10% again, yada, yada, yada. And then you'll see this chart here, and this is from the Federal Reserve. This isn't something I'm pulling out of my butt. That blue line, which is our GDP, you notice that's a linear line. That's kind of growing. We're becoming more productive. Some may say we're not really becoming more productive. We're just adding more debt. But that red line is the debt. It's the debt that's growing in the economy. And if you take nothing else from this presentation, this is unsustainable. And what does unsustainable mean? It will not be sustained. So if you look at this chart and you're going, okay, if GDP is synonymous with income taxes to some degree, and debt is doing that, how long can that last? And some people thought it was going to end in 2008 and said, for sure, this is the end. This is the debt spiral that we've all been worried about, and this is hyperinflation. And those kind of predictions, like hyperinflation is going to happen tomorrow, I think are always kind of silly. And the reason I think they're silly is hyperinflation or inflation in general is not just an economic question. It is an emotional question, like how are people's emotions when it comes to the currency itself.
Well, and at the heart of it, if we go all the way back, the Fed trades human trust in the government for money that they print. So these decisions at the end of the day are emotional, and if people don't understand that,
bingo,
then they're kind of missing the foundational premise that this whole thing operates on.
Oh, bingo. And really, ultimately, that trust, we've had inflation our whole lives. 2%. It happens slow enough that it doesn't cause people to freak out. Last 2-3 years, it's gone a little too fast for people.
To keep up, for the mind, the emotions and the thought processes to keep up with the value of the money.
Bingo. So a lot of people say, okay, cool, the red line's going up parabolically, GDP is not. Why don't we just cut spending? All right, I'll ask you, what do we cut spending on? Because this, keeping in mind, we spend $2 trillion, about, give or take, over tax receipts every year. So no matter what, even if an administration says we're cutting spending, that means they're cutting overspending. So if we really want to cut to the point where we're spending less than we take in taxes, we have to cut significant amounts. And this whole right side of this pie chart would be that. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Massive amounts. And these are only going up with the number of baby boomers retiring. And what about funding the military?
And because at the end of the day, what matters is your ability to enforce or having that monopoly on force. Because even if you have a very well-off country with lots of money and you don't have a good, strong military, then you have no teeth, so you can't enforce anything, so nobody's going to care, right?
Bingo.
So it's important for us not just to have a strong economy, but also to have the premier military.
Correct. If you want to be the world hegemony. But I ask people, okay, cool. So if you're in the military or you know somebody in the military, question is, would you serve if you weren't getting paid? And I've pulled the room presenting this to the military, and they're like, nope, I would not. And I wouldn't either. So the question is, at what point will they not be able to pay you? I don't think that'll ever come because they can print the dollars. But there will be, and it's happened in a kind of a smaller scale, but if inflation's 10 and your pay raise is 5, they just gave you a 5% pay cut. And those little, small increments, they're actually paying you less. And even this year, Pentagon leaders warn debt default. This is when they couldn't raise the debt ceiling. So if they can't raise the debt ceiling, they cannot pay all the things in that pie chart. They can pay some because they still have tax receipts. They can't pay all of them. And so the Pentagon leaders were warning the debt default could endanger troops' pay. So in order to pay troops, according to Pentagon leaders, we have to have debt, a debt ceiling, a massive one that never is a ceiling. It's just a moving target, right? So where we are today is the U.S. is paying record amounts of interest on its national debt to the tune of more money than the U.S. military. So interest only on our debt is bigger than the entire U.S. military budget. And that's per year. And that's interest only. That's not paying it down. It's just interest. And that's growing. Go ahead.
It's like paying PMI, primary mortgage insurance on your house, right? Most people
except you have at least you have a house, right?
Right.
We don't have anything for that. That was just consumption.
Yep.
It would be like the interest on a credit card, because
on a high interest credit card.
Yeah, if you bought stuff with a credit card, you bought stuff on Amazon, you don't have an asset that you can leverage against. It's just you bought stuff, and that's kind of where we're at in the economy.
And if called upon, you have to pay with it with your soul.
Bingo. So you'll notice the inverse correlation between currency and circulation and the purchasing power of the dollar. And I always ask people, do you think this red line, currency and circulation, is going to go up or down? And trend says it's going up. And the reason it has to continue to go up is as you add more dollars in debt into the system, you need more dollars to pay off said debt.
The more you print, the higher inflation goes.
Yep.
The more you need, the more you print, the more you leverage that trust until the trust fails, and then the whole house of cards comes crashing down.
Bingo. So here's where, when we were talking about hope, these are some things to consider when we're talking about societal implications affecting the economy, because that's a reality. What I was just talking about. You can assume, you can say, okay, here's how I think it's going to play out, but the reality is important to contextualize where we're at economically. So what has happened, and why people are less and less likely to believe in the American dream, and less likely, or more likely to blame things on the rich, is a lot of things that the government's doing. But what's happening when you print money as an economy? Something called the Cantillon effect. So money printer, go burr, money comes out, and normally the rich have the easiest access to money, so they have the best debt terms, etc. And so what they do is they buy assets, and that's not their fault. That's a smart thing to do. So the rich get access to the money and debt first as money is printed, and they take that cheap money and they buy assets, causing those assets to go up in price. And then everyone else is left to go try to buy a house after the assets have inflated and their income has not. Think back to 2020, 2021 with the UBI stimmy checks. Everything you needed went up in price at a disproportionate rate to the stimmy check you just got. So how this is playing out in the economy, the middle class is shrinking. That means the poor are getting more and more people in the lower income. And the rich get richer. World's billionaires have gotten $1.9 trillion richer in 2020. This was when the economy shut down, money printer go burr.
Well, and this happened in 2008, really.
Big
if you
time.
remember Occupy Wall Street and the 1%, 99% movement, right? 1% of the people on the planet now own 99% of the stuff, which includes space, land, etc., etc. So if you have that disproportionate ownership, it's not possible for the bottom 99% to have any agency. So you get into a monetary autocracy and all of this stuff, right? So now we're here, you and I are down here kind of on the bottom trying to figure out what do we do to have a future for ourselves and our offspring.
Oh yeah. And a lot of people are misdiagnosing that and said, okay, that 1% is trying to destroy us, and therefore we need redistribution. We need French Revolution style. And I'll get into why I think that's a bad idea here in a second. But what this has caused, this excess money printing, incomes growing at, let's just say 5%, and debasements growing at 10%. That means your income's significantly going down year over year. And how are Americans making ends meet? The average American has $90,406 in debt. And so they're living on debt. That's how people are making ends meet. And how long does it take to save for a house? We've all experienced this, trying to get on the economic ladder. It's taking longer and longer. And this is, if everything was remaining the same, meaning income and home prices were going up at the same rate, everything would be fine. But in 1971, it was 2.4 years to save for a house at your income. Now it's 6.9. It's going up as interest rates have risen. And the amount of savings since 1971 has gone down per person. So people are less and less likely to be able to afford a home. Home value changes. So this is a good example of that. Home value changes versus income. So you see that green line? That's home values. Blue line is people's income. So why are if capitalism is designed to sell you products for cheaper, you would think that being able to buy a home as a percentage of income would go down. But in 1971, a home became a piggy bank all of a sudden. A home became an inflation hedge. So not only was it a place you lived, you had a monetary premium on top of it, kind of like gold. Gold doesn't just have utility, it has a monetary premium. So your house is not just a place you live, it's a place you invest. And so you've seen that. I'm sure you have relatives and peers who have a very hard time affording housing depending on when they got in the market.
Well, isn't it strange how that divergence happened right when we moved away from the gold standard?
Yeah. I mean, the gold standard, all that is brakes. It's just brakes on on government spending, implied brakes, and the brakes are off, and people, and the government encourages this, people to go out on the risk curve and spend more and more money on debt. Look at this U.S. consumer credit card debt,
because it allows them power, and the people that will pay for the consequences is not them. That's us.
Of course. Yeah. And consumption, remember back to that slide, 70% of our economy, and we're consuming that by pulling dollars from the future into today at 25% interest rate using credit cards. And you've seen this. These are societal implications. Retail theft is soaring, inflation in the economy. So how do people, either they're living on credit cards, this isn't everybody obviously, but things that are going up, retail theft. What does retail theft do? It causes the company to spend more money on either security or drive their prices up because they're losing money. Earlier this year, you saw Silicon Valley Bank fail. Big banks all over the United States are failing. People are misdiagnosing this, or they're saying things like cancel all student debt, cancel rent. And these people are people I would ask the question to, why is student debt so high? Why is college so expensive? But this is what most people do. Emotionally, they say, I can't afford to live. Give me UBI, cancel student loan debt, etc. So what's next societally? This is what I think is going to happen, which we could talk about, is a debt spiral. So remember I talked about the debt. What happens is if a country decides, if you look at the top of that red circle there, austerity, they try spending cuts and raising taxes, meaning spend less, earn more, spend down the debt. But what that does is reduce household income, because the government has such a big part of the economy. As they spend less in the economy and spend more on paying down their debt, it reduces household income, which increases personal defaults. People can go bankrupt. This can cause the bank to become insolvent and taxpayer-funded bailouts, and this whole debt cycle starts over again. So basically, if the government tries to cut spending now, it causes a recession. Recession causes lower tax receipts. So you see the problem. No matter which way, the problem is when you get to this much debt, you either have a recession or inflation. Which one do you want? How do you want to affect this bubble? And if you cause a recession, tax receipts go down. It does not go down, government spending. So if the government has to spend $6 trillion no matter what, and tax receipts go from $4 trillion to $2 trillion, we now have a deficit of $4 trillion instead of $2 trillion. So you got this debt spiral. Larger deficits, increased debt, higher financing costs, spending more than revenue, and thus larger deficits. Ultimately, currencies are tied to confidence. And I look at it like a theater. When we're talking about confidence, if you go to a movie and somebody gets up and runs out in the middle of the movie, you don't think much of it. But if 10 people get up and run out of the theater at the same time, you probably don't know why they're doing it. You just get up and start running. And so that madness of crowds can happen slowly and then all at once. And that same thing can happen with currency. So it could be,
You're talking about a run on the banks.
To some degree, yes. But or maybe just the last thing I want to use is the dollar. So as soon as you get paid, just like in Argentina, as soon as they get paid Argentinian pesos, the first thing they do is trade it for dollars. So there can be a moment where as soon as you get paid in dollars, the first thing you do is trade it for gold, Bitcoin, whatever. You trade it for anything but dollars, because if you hold that thing, it will lose purchasing power. So that's that kind of herd mentality. My opinion, mathematically speaking, default is inevitable. The question is, the question politicians are asking is how to minimize the cost. Like, how do we minimize the societal cost of default?
We don't.
Well, you can slow it down. You could slow it down. Like if it's very quick, that's not good. So I mean, we've been defaulting for years at 2% by inflating our currency. But if it's so quick, like Weimar, where you had hyperinflation in 2 years, then you can have societal implications. But my question to you, Matt, is with that information, how do you think the average person, when we were talking about hope, and we were talking before we started recording about people not believing in the American dream, and I look at young people and I go, okay, I don't want to sell that. Like, if you just sell somebody like a Pollyanna, like work hard, that definitely helps. Like, there's things you can do to help yourself, but to a certain extent, you could work as hard as you want, and you could be taking 2 steps forward, and the government prints 2 steps back, if that makes sense. Or 3, yeah. So with that information, what hope do you have for young people? How do you sell hope? How do you sell change if you're looking at this inevitability?
Well, I say we don't sell hope. We don't sell false hope, because selling is part of the problem, right? And it's so I think the first thing that people have to do is adjust their frame of reference, understand, get information, see what's happening with society, all the stuff that you and I are talking about, but then adjust your frame of reference to compare the future, our lives, to what we had after World War II is a losing proposition. It's not going to be that either ever again or not that for a long time. We've lived off of those benefits for a long time, and a lot of people have some really good lives, and that's that. They had really good lives. We're going to have to work hard. And you and me, we're going to have to work hard. Our children are going to have to work hard, and our grandchildren are going to have to work hard. That's the truth. To sell anything else is immoral. To promise anything else is immoral. So people are going to do it. Politicians are going to do it. Don't believe them, because at the end of the day, you as the individual are going to suffer more. So first thing is to adjust the frame of reference. This is an economic example of the exact same trend we see in population. If you read the book Empty Planet, I forgot who it's by, but I'll send you the link for the description. They say in 1700, we were 300 million people on the planet. In 1800, we were 400 million people on the planet. 1900, 1 billion. And in 2000, 8 billion. So because of the exponential increase in human bodies, you saw the corresponding exponential increase in money. And with all of these extra bodies and all of this extra money, the people who control this stuff, like the Fed, people with money that can choose how to invest it, have had the opportunity to become rich, or to move from being rich to ultra rich, or autocrats, right? Rulers, financial rulers. Something else I want to mention real quick, just as a side. If anybody doesn't really understand the U.S. monetary system, I would recommend checking out the YouTube short, The American Dream. It's an animated short, and Zeitgeist Addendum, which is the second Zeitgeist movie. It kind of explains everything really well. If you want to talk about conspiracy theories, money is like the ultimate conspiracy theory.
Yep.
So adjusting that frame of reference, the answer is excess in anything is a problem. The reason we're here is because we have an excess of human bodies. Because of modern medical technology, because of vaccines, we've been able to explode the human population. So we have a surplus of human bodies. We don't have enough work for them to go around. The market hasn't been able to adjust. The one thing that has been able to satisfy this excess, I shouldn't say like excess of human bodies, but this massive growth of human bodies is consumerism. Because of that, we now have an uncontrollable exponential growth of economies the world around. We're seeing things like Venezuela and Argentina happen, right? And we're seeing this coming for the United States. So there's 2 ways that I predict this going. One, there's a massive crash, and this is one more reason for another apocalypse, or some tinfoil hat wearing prepper stuff. or this is what humans need for the next step in evolution to get off planet. Nothing ever adjusts in nature until there's a pressure and a lever to push it. So if we keep going and we avoid a collapse and massive destruction and death on a scale unknown up to this point, then we have enough human bodies on the planet to provide the pressure to go colonize off-world, because it's the only place where there's more space. And this is why I think, so now you can talk about another conspiracy theory about Elon Musk wanting to go colonize Mars and needing bodies to be desperate enough to fall for the promise of having a better life on another planet. First Mars and then moons and off-world. Speaking of that, I'm sorry, just one last thought here. If you want to see what it takes to get off-world and colonize the solar system and all of that, there's a little simulation that's meant to illustrate artificial intelligence, but it's really good at helping people understand scope and number sizes and orders of magnitude. It's a universal paperclips clicker game. I want to make a video on this at one point. If you want to test your understanding of reality and the financial system, go play universal paperclips. I can tell you without any cheat codes or anything else that you can finish the game in under 4 hours.
Is this an app or is this just a game you can play?
If you just click or Google Universal Paperclips, it's a web page.
Okay.
And there's an application for phones, both Google and Apple.
Okay.
So if you want to test your ability to understand reality, it's a great simulation. You can do it in under 4 hours. The first time I played it, it took me 16 hours to solve it. So there are your numbers to beat to be better than Citizen Earned.
All right. Next time we talk, I'm going to come back with my report.
There you go. But anyway, the point is, if we're not shooting for off-world expansion and creating that pressure to force us off-world, if somebody doesn't want to buy into that dream, the hope that they have moving forward is to get hard. Stop being soft and get hard. So number one, reduce the consumer needs that a person has, pay off debt. Christmas is coming up. So buy gifts of value. Don't buy cheap plastic Chinesium that you'll have to rebuy next year. Buy a pocket knife. Get outside. Teach your kids how to build a fire, etc. Right? Teach them how to fish. Along with that, adjusting the frame of reference instead of having the frame of reference of consumerism and comfort and feeling good and getting cheap hits off of buying things. Adjust into a value of like real value. Relationships, time spent with one another is much more important than things. Having the skills or using the opportunity of a broken car to gain the skills on how to fix a car and how to become more independent is more important than having a new flashy car that impresses other people, especially when that new flashy car is putting you in debt. And it's a house of cards. It's a facade. It's fake. You're not really doing that well. You just have a lot of debt. So trying to increase that ego and trying to impress people by having that new car is just hurting you long term, right? So adjust that frame of reference and those values. And then hope long term is this is exciting. This is all coming to a head. And we're either going to avoid disaster amazingly, or we're all going to feel disaster. A lot of people tend to get down in that and say, well, that's going to suck. Life's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be painful. Yes, it is. But if you learn to enjoy that pain and assign it meaning, right? This is the suffering versus struggling argument. What's the difference between suffering and struggling? They both have pain. Suffering is meaningless pain and struggling is pain with purpose. So you're going to feel that pain regardless. Turn suffering into struggling by assigning the pain purpose and meaning. So you're gonna
because Monty, I think Monty just puked.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm about there too. So
Yeah.
anyway, the wrap up is
No, get off that.
Assign your pain purpose. Assign your pain purpose and find a mission and go get it. You have a great opportunity.
I agree. Yeah, sorry, folks. I guess I have a kid puking upstairs, so I'm going to have to run. But one thing I'll wrap it up with, you can choose. I agree with everything you're saying as far as pain. Like, it's kind of like discipline. If you think about it with weight loss or whatever, you choose it or it's enforced on you. And the enforced part, whether it's debt, you live above your means, etc., is way worse, right? So you can choose short-term pain for long-term profit, so to speak, or it'll be forced on you. Life will force it on you. And that is one of many things. Like, people tend to focus during stressful times on what matters. And in the United States, being able to live above our means has allowed us to live this life that I don't think is realistic, which is
to ignore it for so long.
Yeah, which is reaping without sowing. It's this pretend world that we can just print our way to prosperity and we don't have to do any work. And what actually feeds the human spirit is work.
It's
like is that suffering. So next time we talk, I threw a couple things in here. I want to talk about overpopulation, more space travel, etc. Because I want to dig into that because I think we might disagree, might agree on that. But Matt, thanks again for coming on. Another fun conversation. Sorry I was interrupted at the end there, but another fun conversation. I'll link that, or if you want to send me that Universal Paperclip. And then you had mentioned a book or a video you can send me too.
Yeah, I'll send you all those.
Cool. Well, folks, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and have a great week ahead. We'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Peace.